Thank you. Our next meeting will be held at 7 p.m. on Monday, November 21st. So we'll do the roll call. Dave?
Here.
Jessica?
Here.
June?
Here.
Lisa? I see Lisa's name. I don't hear her. Lisa, we can't hear you, just FYI. I do see your hand up though. So I hear. Mike's not here. Randy?
Here.
Susan couldn't make it, and I believe Tom also is not here, and I am here. All right. Consent agenda. We have approval of minutes from October 17th, accounts payable warrants and payroll warrants. Take a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
June and Randy. All right. Dave?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa? I see your hand up. I'll take that as a yes. Randy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That is unanimous. Public communications. I didn't see anybody signed up for public communications. So we'll go over to reports and information items. I don't have anything. So Superintendent Morgan, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, and I don't have anything particular to the report. I just have multiple items to speak on, so I will save my report to speak on those items.
Sounds good. Old business, I had school committee goals.
Yeah, so I put that on the agenda when I sent it, but I didn't hear back, so I left it on there. I know you all had approved some goals back a year ago in October, and so I shared them. I just wanted because the communications committee had talked about them, so I wasn't sure if they wanted to continue that discussion with this committee, so that's why I added them.
I'm just pulling up, and I told Brad shortly before this meeting, I am way behind on emails, probably like a week behind at least. So I've not seen anything for quite a while, so I apologize for that.
Oh, no worries. I just prefer it's on there. So if you all want to discuss it, you can. If you want to continue it or just take it off of it, you know, it's pretty easy rather than if you wanted to discuss it and it wasn't there.
Yep.
Craig, excuse me, Tom has been in the waiting room. He has his hand up as an attendee.
Oh. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
We can.
All right. Does anybody have anything they want to chat about on school committee goals? I think I guess one thing that I'll say, I mean, we obviously we didn't do a quarterly newsletter. I think that's kind of rolled into the work that the communication subcommittee is now doing. So we've kind of carried that goal, if you will, over to this year, it seems. And then for the professional development retreat, we did our workshop a month ago, a couple weeks ago. I don't remember when that was. And I think out of that, I know a couple folks have reached out that we should do a committee retreat / workshop just based on some of the discussions and items that came out of our previous workshop. So we can talk about that now if folks want to, or we can continue that discussion and work to get that on the schedule if folks still find that valuable. All right, I'll take that as we will we'll continue that.
Dave has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Dave.
So I think that given the results of the visitor at our last meeting, that it might be good for us to try to start to at least consider some dates for that kind of a get together. It looked like we have some work to do as a committee. So that would be my suggestion in favor of that.
Do we want to? Because I know our next meeting is November 21st, and then we don't have another one until December 19th. We could put something together for December 5th, if that's, I know it's a crazy time of year. Or we're waiting until probably the January, February timeframe, which then you get into school vacation weeks and budget season and all that stuff. Randy?
Yeah, I would say if everybody can make something on then, as well as if we can get something together that's meaningful. Because we do need to plan that on what we're going to talk about and how we're going to go about talking and making decisions. It needs to be planned out. So if it can be planned out, I think the earlier the better.
Is that you volunteering to help plan it out?
I certainly have some ideas from last year. I can certainly put that in and see if I had the time. I would need some help. I couldn't do it myself.
Okay. Does anybody want to work with Randy on that?
I'd be happy to work with Randy on that.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, if the two of you could do that, we'll target the 5th. So put a placeholder on the calendar for now. And then Randy and David, if you just let us know how things are going. If you feel like you can be ready for the 5th, then great. And if not, we need to reschedule, then we'll certainly do that. Superintendent?
Just to clarify, is the retreat a school committee only, just for planning purposes?
I think so. I think that's going to allow us to have some of the open discussions that we need to have in terms of our working dynamic and whatnot.
Okay.
But I'll certainly open that to the committee. Randy, do you have thoughts on that?
I was going to say the same thing. I think this retreat really kind of is to get the 9 of us on board with what each other is thinking and how things should work and how we work as a group, so that once we get that together better, then we can work with the administration and the superintendent better.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Anything else on goals / workshop? All right. Thank you, Robin, for keeping that on the agenda. Look at that. All right. On to new business. We have the para substitute pay history.
Sure. So before I turn it over to Anne Marie, just at the last meeting, we were talking about the differences between the para substitute pay, which is hourly, versus the teacher substitute pay, which is a daily rate. And we did vote the teacher's pay, or the school committee voted, I should say, to move the teacher's daily rate to $100. But we were asked to try to get some history on the hourly rate that paras had been being paid during all 5 of my years. And Anne Marie will explain essentially how long it had been going on for. But the issue we were running into is that the hourly rate for paras was more than what teachers were getting, substitute teachers were getting for the day. So Anne Marie, I think you're on the call. If you could just kind of share with the committee what you've learned.
Yes, so I did try to get some historical knowledge, from people in the business office that have been here longer than Brad and me. And so even like Nancy Haynes, for example, who's been here, I think, for 11 years, it's been step 1 for para substitutes. And so I took it a step further and I actually put out to my school HR listserv, which is about 250 members. It just explained what we do here is that, historically it's been step one. And if you do anything else different in your district, would you let me know? And I literally only heard from 5 different districts. And basically those other 5 districts, just they pay the teacher paras the same. I mean, the teacher substitutes the same as para substitutes. So across the board, that seems to be what at least the industry standard in Massachusetts has been at this point.
So it does look, ultimately, it looks like the hourly rate for paras on step one has been in place for in excess of 11 years.
Exactly. And right now that's $15.46 an hour.
So it did come out again slightly over $100 a day for paras. Something we had talked about was to potentially just make it the same. And then that way it's consistent throughout the district at the rate that the school committee voted on at the last meeting. So there wouldn't be a difference, so to speak.
All right. Randy?
I was just curious, whereas the school committee approves the rates for substitute teachers and nurses, where did starting the paras come on step one come in? Where was that ever approved? I understand that it supposedly has been going on for a very long time. I'm just curious if you found out where that came from and how that got started.
I did not, Randy. That was part of the research I was doing because I have the documents from where, you guys had voted on that many, many years ago. So, I mean, even Nancy Haynes, she said that had preceded her. She had no idea where that came from.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, it would be great to have, something as far as, if you guys want to make it something that you'd vote on the same way as the nurses and subs, that would be great. So at least we have something in writing to refer to moving forward.
I can look at adding that to the GCG, maybe, whichever the substitute rate is, because I know it says teachers and nurses at this point in time. So we can take a look and see if we can add all other substitutes in there as well, so that the school committee votes yearly on that.
So do we need a vote on this, Amory or Brad, or is this just information? I've kind of lost track of where that discussion was going.
Well, I guess I would say, in my opinion, if you're going to do anything different other than what we're doing right now at step one, that maybe you need to vote on something. What do you think, Brad?
I would agree. I would say it would either require a vote or we would just keep doing what we're currently doing. There's not a significant difference. It really does depend on the expertise of a teacher substitute as to whether or not they can actually fill in the role for a teacher. But I know that from the para standpoint, paras are there generally to assist, and the substitute paras generally do take on the role of the para in the room for the entire day. So I do think it's comparable just because of the length of the workday and the responsibilities. So I would say that it should be close, if not the same. And right now, with what we agreed upon at the last meeting, I keep saying it should be the school committee to move the substitute pay to $100 a day for teachers. We're going to be, I believe, within $5 of what the paras are currently getting paid at step one at the hourly rate. Is that correct, Anne-Marie?
Yeah.
I think it's 105.
I can do the math real quick. Yeah. Paras work a 7-hour day. So right now, the paras are making $108.22 if they work a full 7-hour day. So.
Dave?
I'd also like to point out from one of the latest newsletters, the superintendent noted how challenging it was to be a substitute para for a day.
Yes.
It's an incredibly challenging role, and for anybody, including people with higher degrees in education. So they deserve every penny they make.
Yes, they do.
Randy?
I just caution that we keep in mind when we vote this each year, that we want to make sure that the daily rate of pay does not go above what a first year or first step para makes, making it more lucrative to be a substitute than a permanent para in the district.
That wouldn't happen, Randy, because it would be consistent. Step one always would be consistent with the CBA. So it would always be step one. It never would go higher. So that's how we assure that.
Well, if we raise the rate, let's say next year we decide 125 is what we need,
Right.
then that's now higher than what step one makes.
Correct.
So just something to keep in mind.
All right, any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll take a motion if we want to change something. All right, we're going to keep things as is.
I will move that we approve para substitute pay at $100, the same as the teachers for this year.
Second.
All right, Randy and Tom, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so this is to set the para substitute rate at $100 a day. David?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, so that is unanimous. Thank you.
I assume this is effective immediately, just so I can let payroll know.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, Emery. Next up, we have the Alice drills updates. Ms. Smith.
Evening. So I'm just wanted to update everybody on our Alice protocols and our training. So we have done all of our intruder trainings for the fall, which is to the rally point. So all the students know where the rally point is and how to get there. We will still have our drills in the spring. Those are not to our rally point. They're just to kind of be in the building to figure out what to do if their intruder was in your building and what your the options are besides evacuating. And just the other thing that's going on with the Alice team, myself and Officer Zing from the Pepperell Police Department recently went to a NMRSD Stars training. They sponsored it from by I Love You Guys on standard response protocol for reunification sites. So that information we will be utilizing and putting together some information on how to do a proper reunification site, whether you're reunified with parents and guardians based on intruder that you can't get in the building, or if you had a fire in the building, or there was a ventilation issue or any kind of else other situation that could have them, and how to reunify. So based on that, we're gonna be putting some information together. There are some things that we will need to purchase to properly run a reunification site, like vests and signage and that type of thing, to help parents and guardians know when they come in here what to do. But other than that, everything's going as planned, and we have all students and staff are trained within the district at all schools and all areas on what to do in case of an intruder, and we do have plans in place for reunification sites. We're just going to enhance them.
Awesome. Thank you, Superintendent.
I just wanted to add that Ms. Smith, since I've arrived here, and I used to be a STARS team member myself when I worked in the Waltham schools, she does a tremendous job making sure that we have the most up-to-date protocols in place. She's constantly going to workshops, staying current, and really maintains a really good relationship with all three police departments. Something that has really been great to watch is that it doesn't matter what town the Alice drill is taking place in, all three police departments are represented. They're there with the kids, they're there with the teachers, they make it very comfortable, but also working with the staff to make sure that the kids take it seriously and that the kids feel safe while they're doing it. So certainly can't say enough about the work Ms. Smith does and the work that our three police departments do. So just want to thank everyone for their help on this, because it's not easy. It's something kids get scared, especially at the younger age levels, and they really do a great job making the kids comfortable and training the staff.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the Alice drills? All right. Thank you again. Next, we have the 2022 MCAS presentation. Assistant Superintendent Reese.
Good evening, everyone. Ms. Camo is going to actually project the presentation. And I had an issue with my computer tonight, so I'm on my phone trying to do this. So I apologize. Are you able to see the presentation yet? Is it
Not yet.
Okay.
Nope, it's
Coming up now.
Perfect, perfect. So, Ms. Mo, if you can go to the second slide, please. Just some overview points that DESE has provided for us. We attended a training back in the end of September where they just wanted to highlight some things in terms of the state data and how we might interpret the data that we're looking at from our district. So just in terms of 2021-22, this was the first year since 2019 that our grade 10 students had taken an MCAS test. So they didn't take it 2020, 2021. So they hadn't taken it for 3 years. And for all of our other students, grades 3 through 8, this was the first full administration since 2019. Last year, there was an administration for the students, but it was partial, or in the 2021, it wasn't the full test exam. So one of the things the state has cautioned us is that while we may want to be looking at, and certainly within this presentation, I make some comparisons from 21, the testing from school year 2021 to the school year 21-22, they say that that may not be the most accurate in terms of trying to compare both in looking at gains as well as looking at potential losses. Ms. Camo, you can go to the next slide. So just the accountability reports, and these are available on DESE's website. You can see them both for the district as well as individual schools. The information that's included this year on the accountability report is the data that was used for the accountability indicators. So all the different areas and subgroups and things like that that they looked at, as well as both school and student group percentiles. So percentiles for the different subgroups that we're looking at within each school and within the district. What's not included this year on the accountability reports is the determination as to the school's need for assistance or intervention, as well as the targets or measure of progress towards those targets. And those are things, because the state said they're not really 2021 data, it wasn't a full set of data, so they didn't feel like they could use that data to make comparisons for growth when we were looking at the 2022 data. What this does do, it allows us to go back to a cohort model for student growth percentile calculations. And on the next slide, I'll talk about what that means. But the other caution they had is that it really shouldn't, they don't want to make strong comparisons between 2021 data to the 2022 data. They actually, within their state reports and when they put out information, they were making comparisons from 2019 to 2022 data because 2019 was the last time when the test was fully administered prior to COVID. You can go to the next slide, Ms. Cole. So just in terms of student growth percentiles, what that is it's a reflection of how each individual student grew compared to other students that had a similar test score in the previous school year. And so what the state has said in terms of what we call typical growth, anywhere between a growth percentile of 40 to 59 is considered typical growth. If you have a growth higher than a 59 percentile, it means you've grown more than other students that had the same profile as you the previous year. If your growth was less than that, then you had less growth than the typical student. And again, they caution that the last 2.5 years have not been normal, so the results are going to look different. And the other thing that they are taking a really close look at in terms of analyzing the data is the impact of absenteeism. Not just students that were absent, but absences of teachers who may have been impacted by COVID, and just the interruption to education and the impact that that had on students and on the testing results. So I have, and there's lots of slides, a lot of data. What I'm going to do is just highlight from both ELA, math, and science, just some key points on each of the slides that I just want to make sure that we notice. In terms of 2022, North Middlesex was at or above the state average in all grades except for grade 5. And that we had a similar pattern of change in general when comparing North Middlesex and the state change. And that's going to be a message you're going to see here from me throughout the presentation, is just the trends that we saw at North Middlesex were very comparable to the trends that you were seeing at the state level. The other thing that's really important to note when we look at our ELA results is that we were in year 1 last year of implementation of a new curriculum. So we started our EL education program in grades K through 8. And in a couple slides, I'll talk about what's called the implementation dip and the impact that that could have on student results. Actually, if you go to the next slide, Ms. Kamel, and you can click through until you see integration. And I'll explain the whole slide once it's up there. So essentially, we looked at implementing the EL program, and districts look at implementing a new curriculum when scores become stagnant and there's a gap between where we want students to perform and where they're actually performing. And that's when you look at implementing something new. There's a lot of research, and Michael Fullen actually discusses this in terms of the impact in terms of what happens when you implement a new curriculum. And it's called the implementation dip. So essentially, as you start to implement a new curriculum, there's anxiety, there's fear, there's confusion. And so scores and test results drop as students and teachers are trying to navigate a new curriculum. And then as you start to shift upwards, that's where teachers are starting to accept the curriculum. They're starting to explore and create new things within that curriculum, and what they call searching for meaning. So making sense of the materials and how it best supports students. And then you get to that highest level of integration when we're at that point of people really accepting the curriculum, understanding it, and knowing how to navigate it. And the goal of any type of implementation is really to minimize. There's always, the research shows pretty consistently the implementation dip is a pretty valid or happening, but the goal is to minimize that dip, to not go down so low and to shorten the amount of time before you start to see the growth. And Ms. Camo, if you can go to the next slide, what they talk about in terms of the research on minimizing that gap or that dip is really looking at how do we support our teachers? How do we make sure we're providing empathy and understanding for the challenges associated with implementing a new curriculum, celebrating the small wins and that happen within the classroom, both for students and for teachers. And then the final piece is around professional development. And the research shows the strength of embedding professional development within the school day as opposed to times outside the day. And that's where we're working this year with EL education and have consultants coming in that are helping guide the work that Ms. Camo has been leading and doing a phenomenal job with, and also working with the teachers and our teacher leaders. So building the capacity of our teachers. So you can go to the next slide, Ms. Camo. And this is just now some additional information about the ELA results by grade span. When looking at the grade span, we again see a similar pattern as the state. We continue to be above the state average in all 3 grade level groupings. Grade 10 was fairly consistent change in performance. Grade 6 through 8 shows some signs of recovery, and we're seeing that at the state level as well. So the drop for those grade levels wasn't as significant last year as it had been from 19 to 21. Grades 3 through 5, you saw similar drops and similar scores and patterns as the state. And one of the things the state's identified, and we're going to take a close look at this as well within our curriculum, is the impact on early literacy skills. So from 2020 to 2022, our students in the primary grades haven't had the typical experience. And so because of that, we're seeing some gaps in some of the early literacy skills. And that, again, is consistent with what they're seeing at the state level. You can go to the next slide. And then, I know the school committee is always interested in looking at subgroups and how those students are performing. Again, we see fairly consistent patterns with the state. Although our EL or former EL, our second language learners, we see some real improvement from 19 to 22 in terms of scores. As well as with the students with disabilities, there was a greater drop from 19 to 22 as compared with the state. And then go to the next slide. And then this again just looks at our grade 10 scores. We separated out grade 10 from grades 3 through 8. At grade 10, again, fairly consistent with the state, but we do see significant growth both for our students with disabilities as well as the economically disadvantaged students, so our low-income students. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to take a quick look at writing because the 2 pieces that the state identified as areas of concern were both the early literacy skills as an impact of COVID and the pandemic and just interrupted or different learning opportunities for students, as well as shifts in writing and the impact that writing has had. So writing continues to be an area of concern, both at the state level, as well as for North Middlesex. And Lisa, if you go to the next slide. So the 2 areas that we look at for writing are both idea development and writing conventions. And what this next slide shows is that the writing results declined significantly for both the state and for North Middlesex between 2019 and 2022. They're seeing more students that are getting a 0. So within each grade level, on one of the future slides, it just shows the different types of prompts that they had at each grade level. We're seeing more students that are getting a score of 0. So they're not earning any points on the writing prompts. Larger decreases were noted in performance of students in grades 3 to 5 than in grades 6 through 8. So again, that's a similar pattern as what they're seeing at the state. And I think, again, reflective of some of those early literacy and writing skills. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. And again, this is just the 2 areas that students get scored on, both their idea development, how they organize their thoughts. Within the MCAS, the focus has been on narrative writing. And using effective literary techniques, details, and well-structured sequences. And then also the other piece is looking at the writing convention. So not their thinking, but how do they organize their writing? How do they use correct spelling, punctuation, word usage, and those other standard conventions of grammar. Go to the next slide, Lisa. I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, but this just shows at each grade level how many prompts there were, and then what the focus of the prompts were. So you see starting in grades 3 and 4, there was only 1 writing prompt. As you move up into the upper grade levels, you have 2 writing prompts. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. Again, 2 writing prompts, grades 7 through 10. For the actual PowerPoint presentation, those are all the ones that are underlined are hyperlinked to the actual question from the state. That's available online. Anyone can actually access that by going to the state website. The ones that are not underlined, the state did not release either the prompt or the reading associated with the prompt. Next slide, Lisa. So in terms of the key takeaways, writings declined significantly in both North Middlesex and at the state. When we compare the change from 2019 to 2022, there's a decline in overall ELA scores at all grade levels. Our scores are consistent in terms of the change or the impact with state results. If for our 2022, again, we did better than the state average in grades 3, 6, 7, 8, and 10, and within subgroup categories. So you saw back on a previous slide, just in terms of the performance of our second language learners, our students with disabilities at the upper grade levels, as well as students, low-income students. The two areas of improvement that the state's identified and that we're looking at is both the impact of the lower writing scores and how we can help enhance that for our students through the EL education program, as well as the early literacy challenges. So in a later slide, we'll talk about what we're going to be doing at the district level to address some of those areas. Now on to math, and again, I won't go through all, but it's a consistent pattern with what they saw at the state. Scores at or above the state performance in all grades except for grade 5. Significant declines were noted in performance from 2019 to 2021. Improvements noted in performance from 21 to 22, but it's still weaker than the 2019 performance. So again, we're starting to see some recovery from 21 to 22, but still not where we were or where we want to be based on the school year 2019. This slide again just shares the subgroups for grades 3 through 8. And we see some stronger performance at the state level from our EL students. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. This is the grade 10 subgroups. The performance of the subgroups are better in North Middlesex than state in all areas. There's no EL score because the group size for the number of students that were taking the test wasn't large enough for the state to release overall scores within that subgroup. We do note improvements from 2019 to 2022 by our students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged. So again, that we saw that those two same groups doing really well with the ELA. They also did well with their math test. And then there was a decline in male performance from 2019 to 2022, which was a greater decline than the performance for our female students. We are doing some additional statistical analysis, both for ELA, math, and for our science, as we look at the subgroups to look at, while there may be some differences within those groups, are the differences statistically significant to say that there's a major or an issue between the performance of one subgroup versus the all students group. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. Just some key takeaways for the math data. We see improvements overall from 21 to 22 in grades 3 through 8. There's a decline in math scores from 21 to 22 for grade 10. The shifts are consistent from North Middlesex to the state. And for 2022, we performed better in all grades except for grade 5 than the state average and within subgroup categories as well. We'll shift on to science. And so with science, the things that I want to note is just that we're at or above the state average, and then you see signs of recovery. So if you look at those changes, both for the district as well as the state, because the state was recognizing some recovery as well. The drop wasn't as significant from 19 to 21 and 21 to 22 for grade 5, and we actually see improvement in grade 8. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. Again, this just shows some of our subgroup performances for students in grade 5 through 8. And overall student performance was at or above the state average. And the drop in scores was consistent with what we were seeing at the state level as well. The next slide is just the same thing in terms of our subgroup performances for grade 10. And our subgroups are performing significantly better than the state subgroup performance for grade 10. So some key takeaways for science. Grades 5 and 8 are showing signs of recovery compared to the change in scores from 2019 to 2021, with changes in scores from the 21 to 22 results. Grade 8 results comparing 2021 to 2022 show signs of improvement. At grade 10, North Middlesex, strong performance compared to the state average, a difference of 19% in the number of students that are exceeding or meeting the expectations, which was really nice to see that strong performance for our high school students. And in 2022, the North Middlesex performed at or above the state average at all 3 grade levels. And then again, the shifts that we saw in terms of the declines, as well as the recovery period, was consistent with what they were seeing with the state results. So the next few slides, and I'll again go through these quickly, but this just shows the comparison between what we call our DART districts. So the state looks at, to develop the cohort of who your DART districts are, they look at which districts are most comparable to you in terms of the size, the number of students, in terms of the different subgroups, the percentages of students with disabilities, English language learners. And so they try to match you with other districts that they say have a similar look. And when we compare ourselves with the other DART districts, we outperformed 5 out of 10 DART districts in the ELA scores. And the decline of 7% from 21 to 22, the DART district, our decline was 7%. The DART district average decline was 6.1%. Same thing for looking at math. We outperformed 3 out of the 10 DART districts, and we had an increase of 5 percentage points between 21 and 22. And the DART districts also saw an increase as well, with an average increase of 6.7%. Looking at science, we outperformed 6 out of the 10 DART districts, and our scores stayed stable between 21 to 22. And there was an average decline of the DART districts of just about 0.25%. As we look at DART districts for grade 10, North Middlesex grade 10 students outperformed 8 out of 9 DART districts and had the same performance as Sandwich School District. We had a decline of 5% from school year 21 to 22, whereas the average DART district decline was 4.36%. Looking at math, our 10th graders outperformed 5 out of the 10 DART districts. Again, same performance as Sandwich. I'm sorry, not the same performance as Sandwich. They outperformed 5 out of 10 DART districts with a decline of 6% from 21-22, and the average DART district decline was pretty low at a 0.1%. So just some overall key takeaways from the DESE. As you can see, we're very comparable with what the trends were at the state level. The only difference in terms of some of the state highlights was they saw a slight increase in science scores at grade 5, where we did not see, we saw improvements, but not at the same rate that the state had seen that. So obviously, when we look at these results compared to our pre-pandemic, our 2019 school year, both within North Middlesex as well as at the state level, we have some way to go to fully recover from those learning losses. And the state really, again, highlights that student absenteeism continues to be both for the past as well as continued absenteeism can impact the recovery efforts. So the North Middlesex outperformed the state in ELA in 6 of the 7 grade levels, in 5 of the 7 grade levels for math, and in all 3 grade levels for science. And I'm not going to go through the DART districts again, but you again see the comparison to how we performed compared to DART districts. You can go, so the other thing we look at is, and you can go to the next slide, Lisa, is besides just MCAS, which is a snapshot of students' performance at the end of a school year. We also had last year the iReady diagnostic assessment, and that really looks at how students are performing throughout the year and the growth that they make. So the iReady assessment in terms of ELA, and it was administered to our K-8 students. 62% of the students in the district were assessed as either at early or on grade level in ELA. Another 24% were just slightly below grade level. Next slide. The other thing we can do with the diagnostic from iReady is look at growth. So similar to the student growth percentile that the state has, what we see in terms of growth is that 50% of our students made at least 1 year of growth last year, and that's what they're calling typical growth. Stretched growth are those students that made growth beyond what we would expect them to make in terms of 1 year's worth of growth. And there were 27% of our students that made it more than 1 year's worth of growth. Next slide, Lisa. So same thing with math. The iReady diagnostic was also available for math. And 50% of our students that were assessed in grades K-8 showed that they were assessed at being on grade level, with 31% being just slightly below grade level. We also can do that same level of growth analysis for our students on the iReady assessment. And what this showed for us last year was that 38% of the students made 1 year of growth last year. So they just at 38% made what we would consider typical growth compared to where they started. And then we did have 15% of the students that actually showed more than 1 year's worth of growth compared to where they were at the beginning of the school year. And the final slides, and I promise I'm almost done. These are just each of the elementary level, middle, and high school took a look at the results and tried to identify what are the areas that they want to improve on and continue to work on. And so at the elementary level, you can see the different strengths that they've identified, but more importantly for me and for planning are the areas of need and improvement. So they want to look at time for writing support across all grade levels and all content areas. So what we're seeing with writing is it's not just about being able to write a narrative, but it's also about being able to write within science, math, and other content areas as well. They want to continue to develop the foundational skills for reading, writing, and math. And then identify PD for continued training in the IM. So that's the math program that we're implementing this year. And then looking at social skills, groups, and lessons to provide students support in those areas. We're seeing, because of the pandemic, and especially at the lower grade levels, and the inability for students or kids to interact with one another due to the pandemic in ways that they may have done in the past, that lack of social skills development that they develop in the early years is definitely showing itself as the students are entering school in the early grade levels. Lisa, the next slide, the middle schools. Again, they identify some areas of strength and supports that they have. The two areas that they identified as a leadership team for need were more professional development around the IM math program. So the illustrative math is our new math program that we started this year. So as with the elementary school, they want to see some more professional development around that area, and that they're continuing to work on implementing SEL strategies. So again, those social emotional learning approaches that can impact a student's ability to access learning in the curriculum. And then at the high school level, the two areas that they identified for needs were just working with the curriculum coordinators. So Lisa as the humanities, Kevin as the math curriculum, the directors, as well as working with the department heads to look at the best ways for interventions, planning staff PD around those areas. And then as a similar pattern, we're seeing establish meaningful SEL activities. So looking at how we can continue to support students even at the high school level with social emotional learning, and how they are leveraging the use of their flex time and advisory to really support the students in those areas. And then when we look at the curriculum priorities for my department, working with Lisa as a humanities director, Kevin as the STEM director. We're in the first year of implementation of the IM for grades K through 8, the illustrative math. So we anticipate that similar implementation dip that we're seeing for our ELA students, we'll see as we look at results this year for our math students. And we're in the second year of implementation of our EL program, Expeditionary Learning for grades K to 8. Science, we are moving forward with implementing Project Lead the Way, which is a more hands-on interactive approach to teaching science. And we're looking at ways to create pathways for students at the high school in that area, as well as how to build in the programs and activities at the lower grade levels. At the high school level, we're also, our secondary level, we're also looking at Portrait of a Graduate, which really identifies what do we think a learner should look like when they exit North Middlesex Regional High School, whether they're going to college, whether they're going to be working, whether they're going into the military. What are those core skills and competencies that we believe as a district we need to be developing within students, and how do we support them and implement and embed opportunities throughout the curriculum and throughout their time at North Middlesex to develop those skills. And then the final piece, and I think you've seen this from some of Superintendent Morgan's recent memos around the Acceleration Academy. And so not just in North Middlesex, but across the state, we're seeing the students in grades K to 2 who didn't have a typical K to 2 experience. We're recognizing those gaps in learning opportunities for them. And so leveraging some of the ESSER funds, we're going to be looking at a way to create an acceleration academy for identified students in kindergarten through grade 2 during the vacation weeks to build in some of those foundation skills in math, in ELA, and also in social emotional learning. So any questions? And I know I went through that quickly, but data, you could spend hours talking about data.
David?
Hi there. Thank you so much for that great presentation. First, I would really just like to commend all the teachers and people in the district, because you are right, Mr. Barbeau-Reese. Every single year, for almost every single category, it does look like we are above the state average. So even if we're losing more, we had more to lose. So that would make sense. I do have a few questions. If you don't mind, I'd like to go through them.
Sure.
And this can be something that the district gets back to me on. But so one of the things I was thinking about just with that 5th grade drop off is, have we looked at districts that have the separation? So like we do K4 and 5-8. Have we compared ourselves to other districts that do K4 and 5-8? Whereas that's such a transitional year to have it also happening at the same point. Whereas other districts might be, K6. And so those kids are more comfortable with their teachers, with their surroundings. That I was wondering if we've looked into that at all.
I have not, but that's certainly something I can look into. And the other thing that I can also look into and share back with the committee is just, is this a trend we're seeing every year at grade 5, or was it just the student group that we happen to have that year in terms of their performance?
Sure. So one of the other ones, has there been any early reports from teachers or groups on the new math program? Because math, and it's not just a COVID year thing, math really does seem to be, our area with most room for growth. So have we heard anything about this new math program?
So I think the teachers are continuing to grapple with it, and we're seeing some of that implementation dip. It's a change in thinking and a change in approach of how to teach math with a greater focus on language and math discourse. And I think teachers are still working to try to figure that out. The other challenge we're seeing, and teachers are doing a great job of really building this up, is because it's a shift, students at the higher grade levels, I think, are struggling more with it than at the lower grade levels. Because there's an assumption from the program that if a student's in 7th grade, that they've had that program since kindergarten.
Yeah,
And so it's more difficult for those students. And I think the teachers have a greater challenge just in terms of that transition piece.
sure. Okay. Do we know what the average drop was in MCAS scores? Well, actually, I looked at that data and it looks like, it looks like maybe like 5 points, which the thing I hate about, all of these different tests is that 5 points can put you from being a 3 to a 2, and all of a sudden alarm bells are flashing. Whereas honestly, there's not too much of a drop. So never mind, I did answer that myself later on, or you guys answered that for me, excuse me. Next up, math. So do you guys have the data on the subcategories for the math tests? So did we keep our numbers base 10 up, or our algebra or our algebraic operations? Did we keep those subcategories up, whereas like measurement and data or geometry fell off because we just didn't have time? Did we break those math scores down to subcategories?
Not for the purposes of this presentation, but that's something that the principals are actually working within each of the schools to break down and look at in terms of school performance and identify what are those areas that we can continue to do well in, as well as ones that we might have had a drop. So I can look at more into that as a district as well.
Terrific. And then just just looking at everything too, and especially our special education department too, it really looks like let me see here, what slide was it? Excuse me. I was looking at it at the end here. Yeah, so slides 38 and 39. It really looks like our students on our special ed students are holding a firm above the state average. So congratulations. Yeah. So awesome. Thank you so much for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Tom?
Thank you. Yeah, similarly, I think I was encouraged, by some of the demographic data that we saw in there. Like Dave, I think I continue to be kind of worried or concerned, I guess, about the 5th grade transition there. And I think, some of the stuff that we've seen in years past even predates some of the pandemic. I guess my question would be, is there more that we need to do as a district, as a committee, with that transition to middle school, or, are there things that we're considering with that transition?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd like to kind of dig a little deeper into the historical trends for 5th grade, but I think you both bring up a really good point in terms of that transition piece and the concerns around it. So we'll look at that.
Okay. And then I know, as part of some of our work that we've been hiring some interventionists to kind of step in. I'm just wondering what their role might be in, supporting some of these gaps.
Yeah. So one of the things, the interventionists have been great. Some of our intervention supports are provided or funded through Title I. We were able to hire a number of additional interventionists through the ESSER funds, and they are working with students that are specifically identified through some of these assessments, such as iReady or IXL, that are identifying where we're seeing some of the gaps for those students, and then working individually with those students, and then meeting with Kevin and Lisa on a regular basis to look at data and look at how they can support individual students, which students might be ready to move out because they've mastered the skill that they're weak in, and which students might come in for extra support. But it's been a great resource to be able to have all those interventionists. They do a great job.
Awesome. And then my just last question, in terms of the iReady assessments, would these ever at some point be available to parents or guardians? I know I would love, like, if, just as a parent, would love to, get my hands on that and look at my own kids.
Yeah, I think, as teachers share some of that information out at conference time, but if there's like a parent that wants to see a report, we can get that information. I will say this year we've shifted away from iReady to IXL. But it also offers similar diagnostic opportunities. It just builds in some additional instructional opportunities connected with the diagnostics. And so we felt like that was a better tool to be using to assess the students.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else questions, comments? All right, my only comment, and it kind of follows on what Tom said, is and obviously don't need to answer it right now, but kind of interested to know what we as the school committee can be doing to help support some of the efforts that are needed to bring us up in levels where there are perceived gaps. So look forward to learning what more we can do to help support that, especially with budget season coming up.
Yeah.
So that would be helpful. And again, appreciate you walking us through it. I was looking at some of the materials before the meeting, and like the graph and stuff didn't make sense to me. So I appreciate the explanation and the detail on that.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, if no one has anything else, questions wise, then we'll proceed. All right, thank you again. Next up, we have October 1st enrollment. And I don't see Missy.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So this was part of the packet, and it does have our October 1st enrollment for this current school year. And in looking at, the numbers in total, overall, when you look at the district as a total, we're at plus 32 from where we were last October, but we're actually down 44 from where we were in June. So that just shows really a lot of transition in the district between October and the end of the school year. It's something we see transition in the summertime. For example, last October, we were at 2,990 students in the district, and currently we're at 3,022. But in June, we were at 3,066. So that represents really a loss of 44 students. And the place that it really seems to be coming from is we have seen a pretty significant drop in student size at the Spalding Memorial School, which is down 46 students from last year. A good deal of that has to do with the fact that it's got a very small kindergarten class with 71 students in it. Certainly much smaller than usual. So small class sizes, which is certainly great for those students. But both Nancy Haynes and myself are looking into, we're trying to dig deep and to try to figure out why there seems to be a loss of students from Townsend. And we're looking obviously at Neshoba Tech. We are looking at some of the charter schools, and we're also looking at kindergarten age students that may have chosen other options. But overall, again, for October, we are in a pretty steady place, but those numbers can change certainly between now and the end of the school year. Something that we have noticed that's really created a significant bump is at Varnum Brook. Varnum Brook essentially went from 561 students last year at this time to 636 students for a plus 75. We continue, and it was a very busy summer at Varnum Brook. We had lots of students coming in. That is where our sub-separate programs are as well, but we also continue to see students moving into some of the sub-separate programs. Obviously looking for least restrictive environments for all of our students, but we have seen a significant increase in the student body at Varnum Brook. So overall, it's steady, but the two anomalies would be Spalding and Varnum, where Spalding lost a substantial number of students, in part due to a small kindergarten class. So it's, I guess it's all relative in how you look at it, but certainly a significant increase at Varnum Brook, which we're certainly looking at. We're looking at the staffing to make sure that we have adequate staffing in place. Questions on the October 1 reports? And again, these change.
I had just a question on the, I guess the Spalding numbers. Have we looked at and correlated that with just new growth in Townsend, like new homes or folks moving in, to see if that's related to that at all? Or
So we're looking at growth, and we're also looking at, again, the number of kindergarten age students in the district and how many are actually attending school in the district, how many students are being homeschooled. And then, of course, looking at some of the other alternatives, whether it be charter schools, private high schools, Neshoba Tech. So it is something that Nancy Haynes and I are looking into, but it is going to take some time. There's nothing glaring right now, but certainly something that is popping up, but it does not account for all 44 students on average are the small kindergarten registration size.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Yeah, I know we can't, do this every year, but just thinking long term, any consideration as we have maybe some openings at Spalding, and then we have, it feels like most of the programs have ended up over at Varnum, balancing some of that out a little bit.
So certainly, I think one of the issues and one of the reasons why we moved the programs to Pepperell, both elementary and middle, were essentially twofold. One, because it made sense to have our evaluation team chair not have to travel as much, and it allows her to focus her attention on those two schools that are so close to each other without really losing a lot of travel time between the schools. Of course, the other piece is looking at special education transportation, in making sure that where the majority of students in the sub-separate programs are coming from Pepperell, because it's the largest town in the regional school district, it made sense to transport the majority of students to Pepperell as opposed to Ashby at the time, where the fewest students were coming from Ashby. So again, there's certainly room in Ashby, but with that comes separating the schools by about 30 minutes for the evaluation team chair to get there. And again, it's a loss of travel time both ways. And then on top of that, we'd have a significant increase in transportation costs. We saved well over $100,000 in transportation when we moved the programs to Pepperell. As far as Spalding goes, right now, there is no room. The only room that we have in Townsend would be at Squanicook, and we obviously want to make sure, as I'm sure everyone's aware, that we just want to keep the kids with their like peers, age group wise. And that's why we continuously look for solutions for the Gateway program, which again doesn't, that's the 18 to 22 population that is at Varnum Brook, because right now there currently is no space at the high school for an additional classroom.
Thank you.
So obviously always looking at potential solutions, but certainly the size of Varnum Brook has become is starting to raise some red flags, and we had a meeting there today about potentially adding some staffing with ESSER funds to get us through the balance of the school year.
Great, thank you. Randy?
I just had a quick comment on the presentation. I don't know if anybody else did or not, but I found these pages a little awkward to figure out what was going on. If we can just have one page summarizing this in the future versus each one of these pages with all of this information as close together as it is, trying to figure it out and what it's telling me would be appreciated.
Sure, I can certainly look to do that.
Any other questions from anybody? I think just to kind of piggyback on Randy's comment, I don't remember, I might be remembering my own spreadsheet, or I thought in the past we had a visual of some comparisons year over year, so I'd be interested to see that as well, where we usually see the ripples of the grades moving ahead, and you can kind of see where there's some anomalies.
Sure. I believe this is either coming directly from DESI or through Aspen. But I can certainly look to see if we can have it improved as far as for presentation purposes.
Sure.
Certainly.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, if there's nothing else on enrollment, we'll move on to the memorials list, Superintendent.
Sure. So for this, I just wanted to provide as updated a list as possible for the committee. And I know that at the last meeting, there was a request to have a memorial bench from Mr. Dion for his daughter, Melissa, on the property. I know we were talking about potentially Varnum Brook, but also potentially the high school. But before making any decisions, we just wanted to get this off to the committee. This did come from the Building and Grounds Department, and this is currently what we have. We actually have some things on here that have not been replaced since the high school building project, which is something that does need to be addressed. Just some of the, not the actual, it's essentially some plaques that need to be replaced. Again, from the building projects as things were moved and disrupted as part of the building project. So certainly we will continue to look at options from Mr. Dion, but also wanted to provide the committee because I know it has been asked. It was asked prior to COVID, and then COVID came and it kind of slipped away. So I just wanted to bring this back to the committee and at least put at your fingertips the most current list of memorials that we have in the district or things that would be classified as donations. And again, I know parts of it are confusing. And again, there are certainly still some question marks, but if anyone has any additional information on, something like the sundial, which again, we don't have a lot of history on that, but if someone if one of the committee members or perhaps someone from the towns is aware of it, then it would enable us just to complete the list and add some more details to it.
I think I mentioned at the last meeting that I know there's a plaque by a tree, but I think there's a couple plaques for rooms at the former Peter Fitzpatrick School. Do these, and this is more of a logistical question, but do these stay with the facility, or these for the district? I know we move like plaques, like dedications from a particular room in the old building to now a different place of the new building. Like what's the thought on how that all works, and should we be tracking gifts that are at facilities that aren't part of the district anymore?
So I think it would be dependent on what's been named or what's been dedicated. So for instance, if it's something, using a simple one, a library, would be difficult to move that unless a new facility was named after that. And oftentimes, as new facilities are built, sometimes things are rededicated. So I think we could certainly find a place for things, for plaques that are not necessarily assigned to a particular room or to a particular space. I think we can certainly find a place for that. Essentially to keep that memory alive. But I think we just have to be cautious about what it was, what the memorial is standing for. Is it standing for a room at the Peter Fitz, and would moving it, take away from that. So maybe we can come up with a list of items that are not on this, because I'm sure we have quite a few that are out there that are not a part of this list, especially in some of the buildings that may have been taken offline, and look to see if they can be reconstituted elsewhere in the district. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And even if it's just a reference to, hey, this we're aware of this previous remembrance or what have you, but it's not part of the district anymore, or maybe a space has been rededicated, so it's kind of, we're acknowledging it, but it's not maybe displayed or anything anymore. That naming might not be in place. So
Sure.
I think that's fine.
And I can be happy to set up a time to come over to Peter Fitz and take a look also.
Yeah, I think there's 3. I know there's again a tree out back. I think there's a classroom in the old part of the building. I think there's one more plaque somewhere.
Okay.
But, that was it. And I can just send you those details.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions on that?
All right. Thank you for putting that list together. Appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Next up, we've got the feasibility study for Ashby Elementary.
Okay, so at our meeting at this point, it was a couple weeks ago, and this was not formally voted on, just to be clear, but we have, there did seem to be support to at least start moving in the direction of a feasibility study that would not necessarily be tied to MSBA, at least initially. Again, just through conversations that I have had with architects in the state, a couple of OPMs in the state, there's still that issue of the size of Ashby being detrimental to Ashby getting an MSBA approved project. Because again, they're last year, over 50 projects were applied for, and I believe it was 16 were approved. And they're really looking at that 300 student threshold, which currently Ashby does not have. So there was talk at the last meeting, and there seemed to be agreement, but again, no formal vote, that we would, as an initial step, at least bring to the school committee the prospect of doing a feasibility study. And we have learned through legal counsel that we would in fact have to bring on board in an OPM as well, an owner's project manager, which would also come at a cost. And just through some of the, some of the preliminary pricing that Nancy and I have done, knowing that we're going to have to send an RFP out for both the feasibility study and the OPM, we're estimating it's going to be in the ballpark of $250,000 for a feasibility study, and likely a $50,000 fee for the OPM. So a $300,000 price tag. At this point, I can speak for myself and Nancy. We are just a little concerned with putting it off too long. Just because of the work that needs to be done with getting the RFP out there, and the work and the planning that has to go into a potential project. But the reality is at some point in time, the committee is going to have to vote on it and notify the Board of Selectmen, the town administrator, and then it's going to have to go to town meeting. I don't believe that Ashby's doing a fall town meeting, as we're moving out of fall at this point anyway. But I do think we at least have to start getting the ball rolling for a potential spring town meeting to get this on the docket. But again, based on early estimations, it looks like it's going to be about a $300,000 project without MSBA, just for the feasibility study. The MSBA project, again, would likely put us over $1 million for a feasibility study.
And Brad, what?
I don't know if June wants to add anything.
Yeah, go ahead, June.
Sure. Like Brad said, we did not vote on this at our last building committee meeting. However, it did seem pretty unanimous among everyone that there's not a lot more that we can do, and there's not a lot that we can decide until we have some information back from a feasibility study. So we, our next steps would kind of be working towards what information exactly we want to gather out of the feasibility study. But we can't really come to you with a recommendation, or come to the school committee with a recommendation as far as what direction to go with Ashby Elementary until we have more information that we need from the feasibility study. So kind of got our hands tied with that. So yeah, like Brad said, the building committee hadn't voted previously, but if we want to, move forward with the school committee voting on this now, since, we are under a timeline, that's fine. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me or Brad for the building committee.
I guess a question / comment. I assume finding someone to do the feasibility study and OPM and all that, that has to be posted, go out for bid and all that.
Yes.
That's a 60-day process. What's that timeline look like?
I believe it's from what Nancy's saying, and again, Nancy's not here to answer it, but I believe it's in excess of 30 days.
Okay.
So we do have obviously the holidays coming, so it could potentially take longer.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking if it's by the time we get stuff put together, published, evaluate, make a decision. I mean, realistically, you're probably looking at end of December, early January to get started on anything, right? And then that
Right.
leaves you a few months before April town meeting. Is that
Yes.
realistic at that point? Because I don't know what the timeline for the feasibility of that facility would be. Do we have an indication or no?
No, I as far as again, not entirely sure how it's going to work out, just because again, there are so many options that a feasibility study is going to look at as far as how to address Ashby. And there's also the potential for hidden issues that we're not aware of.
Yep.
But either way, I do think I agree with you, and I think that we're up against it for time, primarily because there are items in that building that are going to have to start being addressed, likely before any decisions are made. We do have a potential boiler issue. We have a roof that's been patched, but it hasn't been replaced on the abandoned wing. So there are certainly things that we just need to keep in mind. And I think that, certainly if not at this meeting, maybe at the next meeting, if we could make a decision to put out a feasibility study, it would be helpful. And then that way, it is ultimately going to put it in the hands of the residents to determine if this is something that they want to explore.
Yep. Randy?
Trying to remember in the past if the initial feasibility studies, if we've paid from the district for any of the feasibility studies versus the towns, like taking it out of our E&D. And I wish Nancy Haynes was on, because she would have that information. Brad, do you happen to know in the past our precedent as far as some of these feasibility studies, if the district paid or always the town?
The only thing that I have been told is that Nancy's pretty confident that it's going to be Ashby that's going to have to fund it. She has not mentioned other funding sources unless there were students from the other towns that were attending the school. So something along those lines. But she's, again, just based on my conversations with her, she seems to think that this is going to be that it's going to be an Ashby decision, Ashby vote. But she has not mentioned D&D being used or any other district funds.
I mean, on that note, Brad, I would think that we would want to know what potential sources we have for funding for this. So perhaps the Ashby Elementary Building Committee is meeting next week, next Tuesday, I believe. So perhaps we can formally vote then and just get that clarification from Nancy so that we can come back to the next school committee meeting. We have a second November meeting, right? This month?
Yes.
Yes. And then vote at that time, if that makes sense, everyone. I think that, you know, with 2 weeks, give or take, you know, from now to 2 weeks from now, I think we're still in the same relative time frame.
Agreed.
I guess my only suggestion, and if you're not meeting, sorry, June, your meeting is
We're meeting next week.
next week.
Next week, and then we all meet together. The school committee meets.
21st.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would just, I guess recommend that if there's anything, materials to put together for like the what is it, the RFP process to find someone to do the feasibility study, that gets started sooner than later, assuming that this would go forward, just so we don't lose time. I just get worried that with the holidays, if we don't have somebody on board by, again, early to mid-January, getting that done by the, what is it, the town meetings are usually mid-April, right after the election, or is it early May?
I think it's the first Saturday in May is
In
actually.
May? Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, that gives us like about 4 months. So that'd be my only concern, but otherwise, yeah, I'm all for moving forward with this.
And how soon, like, I know we have to give the town's notice, but is the town's notice 60 days before or 45 before they put it on their warrant? Is Jessica on?
I believe it's 45, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
But again, it's my understanding that we put the feasibility study out for bid. And then once we get the prices, then the towns will have, or unless there's another way, then Ashby would be voting on whether or not to spend the money for a feasibility study.
Would Pepperell and Townsend also have to vote?
I believe they do have to vote,
Okay.
but there's no financial burden on the towns, again, unless there's another funding mechanism.
Or they can choose not to, yeah, or the towns can choose not to do the vote if it's less than a certain percentage, I think.
Mhm.
I think that's why Randy's hand is up. But I'll let her go.
Yes, that was why I was raising my hand. If the town administrators can decide to give approval or no answer in the time frame that they have, which would be an approval, especially if it's like zero cost or minimal cost, that doesn't affect their budget. It's their choice.
Mhm.
All right, anything else on that? So we'll wait till the 21st to take a vote.
Sounds good.
All righty, thank you. Next up, we have the action steps towards goals, Superintendent.
Yeah, so I had emailed the action steps to the committee. I'm not totally clear if they have to be voted on or not, where the goals were approved at the last meeting, but did want to get them in everyone's hands. I've made them, at least in my opinion, all actionable items that I will be able to provide evidence for to show whether or not I've met the action step or not, and thus met the goal or not, and happy to take questions.
Go ahead, Randy.
First off, thank you very much for revisiting those. The new action items are definitely an improvement, at least from looking at them on this end without the evidence at the end, that they definitely can give us some evidence at the end. And I know what you're going for as a final step, which is really nice to see. My other question is actually for you, Craig, is I don't remember exactly what our vote was at the last meeting and whether we approved the larger goal with the action items to come back, or if it was just an approval and an understanding that the action items come back.
My recollection, and I don't have that detail in my notes, but my recollection was that we had approved the goals and just had asked the superintendent to come back with some specific, like the SMART aspect of those goals, which I think is what's in the packet tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, any other comments on the action steps and the goals? All right. So I think we're good. I appreciate, Brad, those updates. That was very helpful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. On to subcommittee reports. Do we have anything from Accelerator Repair, Lisa?
No, and finance is good as well right now.
All right. Negotiations, Tom?
We have an executive session coming up and we can talk a little bit more about that then.
Okay, that works. Policy, Randy?
We just have one policy up for adoption, and that's IHBG homeschooling. I have not received any comments or suggestions on this. Robin, have you received anything since your office?
Nope, not Randy.
Then I will move that the school committee vote to adopt policy IHBG homeschooling as presented.
Who was that second?
June.
June, thank you. Sorry. All right, any questions or comments on policy IHBG? All right, so this is to approve for adoption. David?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Oh, yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you. Anything else on policy, Randy?
That's all for tonight.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll be moving into executive session. So if someone would like to make the motion that the school committee meet in executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 38, Section 21A, for the following purpose. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the North Middlesex Regional School District Teachers Association, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. And purpose 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. And that's for the approval of executive session minutes dated June 8, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
And Jessica, thank you. David?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. The school committee will now be convening an executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 38, Section 21A, for the following purposes. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the North Middlesex Regional School District Teachers Association, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. And purpose 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. The approval of executive session minutes dated June 8, 2021. The committee will be reconvening in an open session at the conclusion of our executive session. So folks could hop over to the other Zoom link. We'll talk to you in a few minutes.